Well, good morning again. It's great to get the chance to gather here this morning. I know it's been cold and snowy and windy, which in Pennsylvania we've gotten so used to our winters just being rainy and gross. It's just a different kind of gross. I know we're all trying to warm up this morning. But it is great to have everybody here this morning and to get the chance to worship and to consider how it is that God is speaking to us and how it is that God's calling us out into the world. As we dive into our text for today, I wanted to start with a question. I want you to think about, have you ever been in a situation where you have been asked to do something that is clearly not your thing? Think about that. If you've ever been put in a situation where someone has asked you to do something that is clearly not your thing. One of the, I think, exciting parts of being a parent is that you get to see your kids grow up and learn what their things are and what the things aren't. I remember particularly, now she gave me permission to share this story, so I'm going to tell a story about Ellie. We put Ellie in soccer, and soccer is not Ellie's thing. You want to know how we found out soccer was not Ellie's thing? She was about 5 years old, and she and her friend Jack, who was the soccer coach's son, were on the soccer field, and all of the kids were playing soccer around Ellie and Jack, while Ellie and Jack stood in the middle of the field having a conversation about God knows what. And Jack's mom yells to Ellie and Jack, and she goes, "Ellie, Jack, are you going to talk or are you going to play soccer?" And they both look over at her, and Ellie says, "Talk." And then she goes, "Well, then get off the field." And then off they came. And that's how we knew that soccer was not Ellie's thing, right? But if you think about it, we've all come in those kinds of situations where you kind of learn things about yourself, or somebody asks you to do something and it's clearly not your thing, right? If someone would come up to me, one of you from the church would come up to me and say, "Gary, we really need a spreadsheet to get ourselves organized here at the church," right? You would probably watch me run away from you. That would be a terrible idea. You do not want me to be working on spreadsheets. But we could probably go to Rich, right? Rich, as an accountant and CPA, Rich probably gets all excited about doing spreadsheets, right? That's definitely his thing. Now, but if you'd come to me and you'd say, "Hey, Gary, could you maybe make this meal for this group of people?" Now, that would be something that I would get really excited about. I mean, think about it. We kind of put in these positions, and it's important that we have the opportunity to be who we are and who God has created us to be, right? Now, in our gospel message for today, it's the continuation in Matthew chapter 5 of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And for the next 2 chapters of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is going to be preaching a sermon to all of us. These 2 chapters in Matthew are the single most read verses and chapters in the whole Bible, because this is literally Jesus preaching a sermon to his followers. And I'll be honest and say that what he says in his sermon are some of the hardest things for us to be able to follow as Christians and followers of Christ. Jesus does not mince words in his sermon. He makes it very clear what is expected of us. The good news, though, in the midst of this, is he's not asking us to be someone that we are not. He's not seeking us to do something that he hasn't already gifted us with the ability to do. And so last week, the text was focused on the Beatitudes, the blessings, right? Where he goes and he shares the list of the people who are blessed by God. And then this week, we are focusing on salt and light, and what it means to be salt and light. And I want you to notice in the very beginning of this text that Jesus, when he calls us salt and light, he is very specific about his wording to say, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. He's saying we are already these things. He's not asking us to be something that we're not. So let's read this together. This is Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 to 20. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but it is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. Very truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." You are salt. You are light. Now, you may not believe Jesus' words. You may think to yourself, there's no way that I can be salt and light, or that I am salt and light. I mess it up too many times. I fall short of the glory of God. No matter how many times I try to be good and make a difference in the world, it always seems to fall short. But Jesus is very clear with his words to tell us today that we are salt and we are light. To prove it to you, I want you to think of some way this week that you have been salt and light. Now, maybe in order to wrap our heads around this, we need to understand what salt and light were used for in Jesus' time. Salt, of course, has always been used as a source of flavor throughout all of history. But particularly during Jesus' time, even more than just sort of flavoring food, salt was for preservation. There was no refrigeration when Jesus was around, and so salt was used to preserve food. And salt was rare. Salt was not something that was readily available to people. As a matter of fact, I actually learned this week, and I'll share this little piece of trivia. You can take it home and share this with somebody else, and they'll think you're really smart because you know this piece of information. I just learned it this week. The word salary actually comes from salt, because back in Jesus' time, salt was a form of currency. It was that much of a precious commodity. It was so needed in the world. And then, of course, light. You couldn't just turn on a light switch in Jesus' day. Light was what was used for guiding, for warmth. And so Jesus' comments in the text about putting it under a bushel, well, if you did that, it would burn your house down. Just wasn't a possibility, right? And so light provided warmth, it provided guidance, it provided direction. And so I want you to think about, in the past week, how have you been salt and light in the lives of the people that you have come in contact with? How have you helped to preserve someone's life this week? It could have been just as simple by recognizing their humanity, just by saying hello, holding open the door when you were going to the grocery store, or to get gas in your car. Maybe walking down the hallways in your school and you just wanted to say hi to somebody. Give them a smile. How did you provide warmth to somebody this week? Did you let them know that they're cared about and loved? Did you help somebody this week? Did you do something for someone? Did you take time out of your busy schedule to volunteer or to help somebody in need? These are the simple and most basic ways that we are who God says we already are: salt and light. Here's where it gets complicated. We as people of God tend to have different definitions about what it means to be salt and light, and what it looks like to be salt and light. And so I want to draw your attention back to the very beginning of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, starting with verse 3 in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus names all of the people who are blessed. Now, when you look at this wording, or this word specifically blessed, and what that means, it more accurately translates into English as God's presence is with, God's love is with, God's happiness is with. Okay? So when you hear the word blessed, think of it in that way as you hear what Jesus is saying. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hungry and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And so what does it look like for us to be salt and light? It means recognizing that God has created us already as salt and light, and as such has called us into the world to be a blessing to other people, to be a blessing to the poor in spirit, to those who are mourning, for people who are meek, for those who are hungry and thirsting for righteousness, for those who are merciful, pure in heart, for those who are peacemakers, for those who are persecuted. That's what it looks like for us to be salt and light. And here's the good news in the midst of all of this. Jesus, in his sermon, transitions from this concept, this idea of we are being salt and light, and as such we are called to be salt and light, right? To work that out in our lives. It's a promise, but it's also a command, right? He's saying, I promise you that I have made you salt and light, and I command you to go out in the world and to be salt and light to other people. And Jesus is saying, and I know, folks, that this is hard. I know that you're going to mess it up. And so he goes on to say, starting in verse 17, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. We hear throughout the gospel text, where Jesus talks about himself, and others talk about Jesus as the fulfillment of the law, not the abolishment of the law, not meaning that the Ten Commandments don't matter anymore, that the Torah and the rules and the laws and the regulations that the Jews followed didn't matter, but that ultimately Jesus came to fulfill that law, to recognize that the things that we don't do them in order to earn God's favor. But Jesus came to fulfill the purpose of the law, so that through Jesus, We could be freed from making mistakes. We could be freed from falling short. We could be freed from the moments in our lives where we try to be light and we try to be salt and we fail miserably. Knowing that Jesus will over and over again show us grace and give us the promise and remind us of the promise that we are, no matter what, always fully and completely salt and light. And as such, Jesus calls us out in the world to be salt and light. Free from making mistakes, free from sin, and empowered through God's grace to be the people that God has called us to be and has equipped us to be all along. And so, my friends, go and be who you are, salt and light. Amen.